The saloon reeked of whiskey and tobacco smoke, the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Eli Monroe sat at the corner table, his weathered Stetson tilted back, revealing sandy hair that hadn't seen a barber in months. The poker game had ended an hour ago, but the drinking had just begun. "I'm telling you, Eli," Jake Harrington slurred, slamming his glass on the scarred wooden table. "You're gonna die alone on that ranch of yours. Ain't natural for a man to live without a woman." The other men laughed. Tom Bradley, Will Carson, and Pete Mullins, all ranch hands who'd known Eli since he'd inherited his father's spread 5 years back. At 32, Eli was the last bachelor among them, a fact they never tired of pointing out. "I do just fine on my own," Eli drawled, downing another shot of rot-gut whiskey. "Don't need no woman fussing over me, telling me when to wash and what to eat." "That's 'cause you never had a good woman," Tom chimed in, his ruddy face gleaming with sweat. "My Martha, she makes the finest apple pie this side of the Mississippi. And my Sally keeps the house so clean you could eat off the floors." Will added. Eli snorted. "And both of them got you trained like circus dogs. When's the last time either of you stayed out past sundown without permission?" The men shifted uncomfortably, and Eli grinned, knowing he'd hit a nerve. Pete, the youngest of them at 25, leaned forward with a sly smile. "You talk mighty big, Monroe, but I bet you couldn't get a woman to marry you if you tried. You're too set in your ways, too ornery." "I could get any woman I wanted," Eli shot back, the whiskey making him bold. "Just don't want the trouble." Jake's eyes lit up with mischief. "Is that so? Well then, I got a proposition for you." He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a crumpled newspaper. "You heard about these mail-order brides? Women from back east, looking for husbands out here." Eli had heard the talk. Desperate women, mostly, widows, orphans, or those with reputations too tarnished for Eastern society's taste. "What about them?" he asked warily. "Simple," Jake said, smoothing out the newspaper to reveal a full page of advertisements. "You pick one, send for her, and marry her. Prove you can make any woman happy enough to stay." The table erupted in laughter and encouragement. Eli felt his pride prickle. "That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. $100 says you can't do it," Pete challenged. $100 says you can't keep a mail-order bride happy for, let's say, 6 months. I'll add 50. Tom said. "Me too," echoed Will. Jake counted on his fingers. "That's $200, Monroe. More than enough to buy that new breeding bull you've been eyeing." Eli stared at the newspaper, the print blurring slightly. $200 was serious money, and all he had to do was play husband for 6 months? His alcohol-soaked brain couldn't see the harm in it. "Fine," he declared, snatching the paper, "but I pick the bride, and you sons of guns stay out of my business once she arrives." The men whooped and ordered another round. Eli squinted at the advertisements, most written in flowery language that made his head spin. His finger landed randomly on one near the bottom. "Miss Clara Whitmore, age 24, seeks correspondence with gentlemen of good standing for purpose of matrimony. Skilled in household management, cooking, and needlework. No family obligations. Willing to relocate immediately. Please direct all inquiries to—" "That one," Eli announced. "She sounds practical. No nonsense." Jake peered at the ad. "Clara Whitmore. Pretty name. Bet she's ugly as a mud fence, though. Advertising like this." "Doesn't matter what she looks like," Eli said, though something in his gut twisted uncomfortably. "It's just for 6 months." 3 days later, still nursing a massive headache, Eli found himself at the post office with a letter he'd painstakingly written. "Dear Miss Whitmore, I am a rancher in Wyoming Territory. Age 32, with 500 acres of good land and a solid house. I am looking for a wife and read your advertisement. I can provide for you and promise fair treatment. If you are interested, I will send train fare. Yours, Eli Monroe." He'd kept it short, businesslike. No point in pretty words when this was just a business arrangement, a bet to win. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away in Philadelphia, Clara Whitmore sat in the tiny room she rented above a millinery shop. The letter from Wyoming had arrived that morning. the fifth response to her advertisement. But this one was different. Direct, honest, without the false flattery of the others. She traced the words with her finger, wondering what kind of man Eli Monroe was. Rough, probably. All cowboys were. But he offered fair treatment and a home, which was more than she had here. Clara walked to the window, looking down at the busy street below. Nobody knew her here, but they whispered just the same. The scandal had followed her from Baltimore. The rumors about her and Professor Mills, the married man who'd sworn he loved her, then denounced her when his wife found out. Never mind that Clara had believed him a widower. Never mind that nothing improper had happened beyond a few stolen kisses. Her reputation was ruined all the same. Her parents had disowned her. "No daughter of mine," her father had said, turning his back while her mother wept. Her sisters were forbidden to write. At 24, Clara was utterly alone in the world, working for pennies at the millinery shop, dodging the wandering hands of her employer, Mr. Garrett. Wyoming. It might as well be the moon, but the moon might be safer than Philadelphia. Clara sat at her small desk and began to write. "Dear Mr. Monroe, I am grateful for your letter and your offer. I accept your proposal and am prepared to travel immediately. I require only the train fare you mentioned and will bring my own necessities. I am a hard worker and will endeavor to be a suitable wife. Most sincerely, Miss Clara Whitmore." She sealed the letter before she could change her mind. Whatever awaited her in Wyoming, it couldn't be worse than the slow death of her soul in this city where every day brought new humiliations. 2 weeks later, Eli stood on the platform of the Cheyenne Depot, watching the steam engine pull in. His friends had wanted to come, to see the woman he'd bought, but he'd threatened to shoot anyone who showed their face. This was humiliating enough without an audience. He'd cleaned up some, taken a bath, trimmed his beard, put on his least patched shirt. As passengers began to disembark, Eli scanned the crowd for someone who looked like a Clara. Then he saw her. She wasn't ugly. That was his first thought, followed quickly by confusion. Clara Whitmore was actually pretty, in a delicate Eastern way. Auburn hair pinned up properly, a traveling dress of dark blue wool that had seen better days but was clean and pressed. She clutched a worn carpet bag and looked around with gray eyes that held both fear and determination. Their eyes met, and somehow she knew. She walked toward him with her chin up, though he could see her hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Monroe?" Her voice was cultured, educated. What was a woman like this doing answering mail-order bride advertisements? "Miss Whitmore." He touched the brim of his hat awkwardly. Welcome to Wyoming." "Thank you." She glanced around, and he saw her notice the stares they were already attracting. A few cowboys lounged against the depot wall, nudging each other and grinning. Women with their shopping baskets whispered behind their hands. "We should go," Eli said gruffly. "Ranch is about 2 hours out." He reached for her bag, and their hands brushed. She jerked back as if burned, then colored. "I can manage." "Suit yourself." He turned and walked toward his wagon, not looking back to see if she followed. This was going to be a long 6 months. The ride to the ranch was silent except for the creak of wheels and the steady clop of hooves. Clara sat rigid beside him, her bag at her feet, staring straight ahead. Eli snuck glances at her profile, noting the proud set of her jaw, the way she didn't complain even when they hit ruts that nearly bounced her off the seat. As they pulled up to his ranch house, Eli felt a moment of shame. He saw it through her eyes, the sagging porch steps, the weathered boards that needed paint, the yard more dirt than grass. It wasn't much, but it was his. "This is it," he said unnecessarily. Clara climbed down without waiting for his help. She stood there a moment, taking it in, and then said quietly, "It has good bones." Something in her tone made him look at her sharply, but her face gave nothing away. Inside was worse. Eli hadn't really cleaned, just shoved the worst of the mess into corners. Dirty dishes filled the dry sink, and dust coated every surface. The main room served as kitchen, dining, and living space, with a ladder leading to a loft and one door opening to what must be the bedroom. Clara set down her bag and rolled up her sleeves. "Where do you keep the water?" "Pumps out back, but you don't need to." She was already heading for the door. "Of course I do. I'm your wife now. Aren't I?" The word hit him like cold water. Wife. He'd sent for a bride, promised to marry her. All for a stupid drunken bet. And now, here she was, rolling up her sleeves in his filthy kitchen, about to make herself at home in his life. That night, after a simple supper of beans and cornbread that Clara had somehow made taste better than his usual fare, they faced the bedroom question. "I'll sleep in the barn," Eli announced. "You take the bed." Clara paused in clearing the dishes. "That's not necessary. We're married, after all." But her voice shook slightly. "We're not. This isn't—" He fumbled for words. "How did you tell your bride that she was just a bet?" "You must be tired from the journey. Take the room." She nodded, relief flickering across her features. "Thank you." Later, lying in the hayloft with his horse blanket, Eli stared up at the rafters. Through the thin walls, he could hear movement in the house, the splash of water, the soft pad of feet, the creak of the bed. Then, carried on the still night air, came a sound that made his chest tighten, muffled crying. Clara Whitmore, his mail-order bride, was weeping into his pillow, trying to muffle the sound so he wouldn't hear. For the first time since he'd made the bet, Eli Monroe wondered what kind of man he'd become. And for the first time in years, he couldn't find sleep for the guilt that gnawed at his gut like hunger. The rooster's crow pulled Clara from fitful sleep. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the unfamiliar roughness of the sheets and the smell of wood smoke brought it all back. Wyoming, her new life as Mrs. Eli Monroe. She dressed quickly in the cold room, pinning up her hair by feel in the dim light. Through the window, she could see Eli already at work. Leading horses from the barn, he moved with easy confidence, speaking low to the animals in a way he'd never spoken to her. In the kitchen, Clara surveyed her battlefield. Years of keeping house for her family had prepared her for work, but not quite for this level of neglect. She tied her apron tight and began. By the time Eli came in for breakfast, she had water heating, dishes soaking, and flapjacks sizzling on the newly scrubbed stove. He stopped in the doorway, clearly surprised. "You didn't need to—" "Sit," Clara interrupted, not unkindly. "Breakfast is ready." He sat awkwardly at his own table, watching as she served him. The flapjacks were golden, the coffee strong. She'd even found his store of bacon and fried it crisp. "This is good," he admitted. "I'm glad." She sat across from him with her own plate, though she barely touched it. "What work needs doing today?" Eli shrugged. "Ranch work, nothing for you to worry about. I meant in the house. Is there a garden? Chickens? I noticed the hen house out back seems empty. Coyotes got the last of them months ago." He focused on his plate. "Never got around to replacing them." "I see." Clara made a mental list. "I'll need supplies from town. Flour, sugar, proper soap, seeds if it's not too late in the season. I go to town on Saturdays. Then I'll come with you." His head snapped up. "That's not— People will talk. People will talk regardless. Mr. Monroe, I am your wife. Hiding me away will only make the gossip worse." Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, but he just nodded and finished his breakfast in silence. The days fell into a pattern. Eli worked the ranch, disappearing at dawn and returning at dusk. Clara attacked the house with military precision, scrubbing, mending, organizing. She found his mother's things stored in a trunk, nice linens yellow with age, a few pieces of good china wrapped in newspaper. She washed and pressed the linens, displayed the china on newly cleaned shelves. "You don't need to fuss with all that," Eli said one evening, watching her polish a silver frame holding a photograph of a severe-looking woman. "Was this your mother?" Clara asked instead of responding. "Yeah, died when I was 15. She had kind eyes." Eli looked at her strangely. Most people said his mother looked harsh, unforgiving. But Clara was right. There was kindness there, hidden in the corners of her eyes. Pa wasn't easy to live with, he said, surprising himself. She did her best. Clara set the frame on the mantel with care. Most of us do. Saturday came, and true to her word, Clara was ready when Eli brought the wagon around. She'd pressed her best dress and pinned her hair carefully. Still, she looked too fine for a rancher's wife, too delicate for this rough country. The ride to town was tense. Eli could already imagine the stares, the whispers. Mail-order brides weren't uncommon, but they were still a source of fascination and derision. It was worse than he'd imagined. Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, actually stopped in her tracks when she saw them. Her companion, Mrs. Grant, leaned in to whisper furiously. At the general store, conversation ceased when they entered. Mr. Monroe, Sam Phillips, the proprietor, greeted with obvious curiosity. "And this must be my wife," Eli said curtly. "Mrs. Monroe." "Pleasure, ma'am." Sam's smile was polite, but his eyes were calculating. Heard Eli went and got himself a bride from back east. Mail order, wasn't it? Clara's spine stiffened, but her voice remained steady. "Yes, and I need supplies. Do you have a list I might review?" While Clara conducted her business with quiet dignity, Eli loaded feed and other necessities. He could hear the whispers following them. "Bought bride. Desperate woman. Wonder what's wrong with her." At the dry goods counter, Clara was examining fabric when Mrs. Henderson approached. "My dear," the older woman said with false sweetness, "how brave of you to come so far for marriage. One does wonder what circumstances would drive a woman to such measures." Clara's hands stilled on the cloth, but she didn't look up. "No braver than any other woman who marries, I'd imagine. We all take our chances on happiness." "Yes, but most of us knew our husbands first, had proper courtships." Mrs. Henderson's tone dripped condescension. "It must be quite frightening, binding yourself to a perfect stranger." Now Clara did look up, her gray eyes steady. Perfect strangers can become perfect partners, given time and goodwill. Wouldn't you agree, Mrs.? Henderson flushed and moved away, but the damage was done. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she paid for her purchases. The ride home was silent. Clara sat rigid beside him, the packages at her feet. Only when they were well out of town did she speak. "It will get easier," she said quietly. "Once they realize I'm staying." Eli glanced at her, guilt twisting his gut. 6 months, that was all. Then she'd be gone, and the town would have something new to gossip about. "Clara," he began, but she shook her head. "It's all right. I knew it wouldn't be easy." That night, she made a feast from their purchases: fresh bread, a pie from precious canned peaches, a stew rich with vegetables. Eli ate like he hadn't in months, which was probably true. After dinner, she brought out a small wrapped package. "I bought something else," she said almost shyly. "For you." Inside was a new shirt, sturdy blue cotton, well made. "You didn't need to do that. Your others all need mending. I'll get to them, but I thought—" She trailed off. He fingered the fabric, throat tight. When was the last time anyone had bought him something just because? "Thank you," he managed. That night, a coyote spooked the horses. Eli ran out in his union suit and boots. Rifle in hand, Clara appeared on the porch in a wrapper, holding a lantern. "Get back inside," he ordered. But she stood her ground, holding the light high so he could see. The coyote slunk away, and Eli checked each horse, soothing them with low words. "Are they all right?" Clara asked when he returned. "Yeah, just spooked." He suddenly realized she was shivering in the cold night air. "You should go in. So should you." But she didn't move. In the lantern light, her face was soft, younger than her years. "Eli, thank you for today, for taking me to town despite. It's your right. You're my—" He couldn't say wife, not when it was a lie. "You live here. You need things. She studied him a moment longer, then nodded. Good night. The next morning, Eli woke to find her already up, but moving slowly. When she reached for the coffee pot, she winced. "You hurt?" he asked. "Just tired." But there was a sheen of sweat on her forehead despite the cool morning. By afternoon, she was burning with fever. Eli found her collapsed by the washtub, delirious and shaking. He carried her to the bedroom, shocked at how light she was. Her dress was soaked with sweat, her skin burning. He'd seen fever before. It could kill quickly out here, far from any doctor. For 3 days, Eli barely left her side. He bathed her face with cool water, forced willow bark tea between her lips, changed sweat-soaked sheets. She tossed and turned, sometimes crying out, sometimes murmuring words he couldn't catch. On the second night, she became lucid for a moment, gripping his hand. "The baby," she whispered. "Don't let them take the baby." "There's no baby here," Eli said gently. "You're safe." "Dead," she said, tears sliding down her cheeks. They said it was God's judgment, my punishment, but she was innocent. Eli's blood ran cold. A baby. She'd had a baby, and lost it. "Shh," he soothed, stroking her hair. "Rest now. Just rest." She quieted, slipping back into fevered dreams. But her words haunted him. What had this woman endured before answering his advertisement? What desperation had driven her to travel across the country to marry a stranger? On the third night, the fever broke. Clara woke weak but clear-eyed to find Eli slumped in a chair beside the bed, still in his work clothes, stubble thick on his jaw. "You stayed," she whispered. He jerked awake. "You're better. Good. That's good. Water?" He helped her drink, his hands gentle. "You've been sick 3 days. Had me worried." "I'm sorry." "Don't." His voice was rough. "Don't apologize for being sick." She studied his face. "You look terrible." Despite everything, he almost smiled. "Thanks. When's the last time you ate?" "Clara, you just broke a fever. Don't worry about me." But she was already trying to sit up. "There's soup stock in the coal box if you heat it. Damn it, woman. Will you rest?" But there was no heat in his words. He eased her back onto the pillows. "I can manage soup." He did manage, barely. When he brought her a bowl, she ate slowly, thoughtfully. "I talked," she said quietly. "During the fever, didn't I?" Eli hesitated. "Some." She set down the spoon. "What did I say?" "Nothing that matters." "Eli." Her gray eyes were steady on his. "What did I say?" He sighed. "You mentioned a baby." She closed her eyes. "I see." "Clara, you don't have to—" Her name was Rose. The words came slowly, painfully. "She lived 3 days. The doctor said it was my fault, that my sin had marked her, but she was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, beautiful." Eli's hands clenched. "Whose baby was she?" "A man who said he loved me, who said his wife was dead." Bitter laugh. "I was such a fool. When his wife confronted me, pregnant and showing, I learned the truth, the scandal. My family couldn't bear it, and after Rose died—" She shrugged. "There was nothing left for me there. The bastard." Eli growled. "He should have what? Married me. He had a wife. Acknowledged the baby. That would have only hurt his children. No, I made my choices. Now I live with them." She was so matter-of-fact, so accepting of pain she didn't deserve. It made Eli want to break things. "It wasn't your fault," he said fiercely. "None of it." She looked at him with surprise. Most people would say otherwise. Most people are idiots. That startled a small laugh from her. "Perhaps you're right." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Clara touched his hand lightly. "Thank you for taking care of me." "You didn't have to." He thought of the bet, of his friend's laughter, of 6 months. The guilt was like acid in his stomach. "Yeah," he said roughly. "I did." The autumn days grew shorter, and with them came a shift in the Monroe household. Eli no longer slept in the barn. Though he'd fashioned himself a bedroll by the fireplace, it was practical, he told himself. The nights were getting cold, and keeping the fire going meant the house stayed warm for Clara. She was stronger now, moving about with renewed energy. But Eli couldn't forget those 3 days of fever, the fear that had gripped him as he'd watched her fight for life. He found himself coming in earlier from the fields, making excuses to check on her throughout the day. "You're hovering," Clara said one afternoon, catching him watching her from the doorway as she kneaded bread. "Just making sure you're not overdoing it." "I'm fine. Eli? Truly." She paused, flour dusting her hands. "Though I appreciate the concern." He grunted and turned away, but not before she caught the slight flush on his weathered cheeks. The truth was, Clara had transformed his house into something he barely recognized. Clean curtains hung at windows that had been bare for years. His mother's quilt, carefully mended, graced the bed. Meals appeared with clockwork regularity, not just food, but real cooking that filled the house with warmth and scent. More than that, she'd brought order to his life. Clean clothes appeared folded on his chair, his work gloves, which he constantly misplaced, always turned up right where he needed them. She'd even organized his tools in the barn, though he'd grumbled about not being able to find anything. "You can find them better now," she'd said calmly. "They're where they belong." One evening, Eli came in to find her sitting by the fire, a basket of mending in her lap. She was humming softly, some melody he didn't recognize, her needle flashing in the firelight. The scene was so domestic, so peaceful, that he stopped in the doorway, transfixed. "Supper's keeping warm on the stove," she said without looking up. "Wash up and I'll serve it." He washed mechanically, still watching her. When had her presence become so natural? When had he started looking forward to coming home? Over dinner, venison stew with vegetables from the garden she'd coaxed back to life. Clara surprised him. "Tell me about your mother," she said. Eli's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "Why?" "I found her journal in the trunk. I didn't read it," she added quickly. "But I wondered, what was she like?" He set down his spoon, considering no one had asked him about his mother in years. "Strong," he said finally. "Had to be. Living out here with Pa, he was—" He searched for words. "Difficult. Drank too much, especially after the war. Ma kept us going." "The war?" "He fought for the Union. Came back different. Ma said, meaner." Eli pushed his stew around. "He never hit her. At least not that I saw. But words can hurt just as bad." Clara nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Ma taught me letters and numbers, made sure I could read, said education was important, even for a rancher." He almost smiled. "She'd have liked you. You're both proper, I guess, ladies." "I'm hardly a lady anymore," Clara said softly. "You are." The words came out fiercer than he intended. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition of shared pain. After dinner, Clara returned to her mending while Eli cleaned his rifle. The silence was comfortable, broken only by the pop of the fire and the whisper of thread through fabric. "I've been thinking," Clara said eventually, "about getting chickens again. Fresh eggs would be nice, and I could sell the extras in town. Coyotes can be dealt with. A stronger coop. Perhaps some dogs to guard them." She glanced at him. "What do you think?" What he thought was that she was planning for a future here, and the reminder of his deception sat heavy in his chest. But he just nodded. "We could try." She smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. "Good. And I thought, maybe in the spring, we could expand the garden, grow enough to preserve for winter." "That's ambitious. I like to keep busy." Her needle paused. "Unless you'd rather I didn't. This is your ranch, after all. It's your home, too." He said quietly, "Do what you like." Home. The word hung between them, loaded with meaning neither quite dared examine. The first snow came early, a sudden blizzard that caught Eli in the far pasture. He fought his way back, wind driving ice crystals into his face, his horse struggling through growing drifts. By the time he reached the barn, he could barely feel his fingers. Clara met him at the door with blankets and hot coffee, her face tight with worry. "I'm fine," he said through chattering teeth. "You're half frozen." She threw the blanket around his shoulders, her hands rubbing warmth back into his arms. "What were you thinking, staying out so long?" "Had to get the cattle to shelter." He let her fuss, too cold to protest. Her hands were small but strong, working heat back into his frozen limbs. "Stubborn man," she muttered. "Come by the fire." She'd built it up high, and the heat was almost painful against his cold skin. Clara knelt to pull off his boots, ignoring his protests. "I can manage." "Hush." She peeled off his wet socks, making a distressed sound at his blue-white toes. "We need to warm these slowly or you'll lose them." She fetched a basin of cool water, not warm. She explained that would damage the tissue, and gently bathed his feet. Eli watched her bent head, the careful way she handled him, and felt something shift in his chest. "Clara." She looked up. "Yes?" He didn't know what he'd meant to say. "Thank you, maybe, or I'm sorry, or something else entirely, something he didn't have words for." "Nothing," he said roughly. "Just, thank you." She smiled softly. "That's what wives do. Eli, take care of their husbands." The word was like a knife between his ribs. He closed his eyes, letting her minister to him, hating himself for the lie between them. The blizzard raged for 2 days, trapping them inside. Clara seemed to bloom in the enforced closeness, chattering about books she'd read, places she'd seen in Philadelphia. Eli found himself talking too, about breaking horses, about the land, about his dreams for the ranch. "Why didn't you ever marry before?" Clara asked the second night, as they played cards by lamplight. "A successful rancher, still young, you must have had opportunities." Eli shrugged. "Never found the right woman, I guess." "What would she be like, your right woman?" He studied his cards to avoid her eyes. "Don't know. Never thought about it much." Liar. But she said it gently, teasingly. He looked up to find her smiling at him, and something turned over in his chest. When had she become beautiful to him? Not just pretty, but beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with her features and everything to do with the way she moved through his space, the way she hummed while she worked, the way she looked at him like he was worth looking at. "Your turn," she said softly. He played a card at random, no longer caring about the game. That night, as they prepared for bed, him to his bedroll, her to the bedroom, Clara paused in the doorway. "Eli, this storm, it made me think. We never know what tomorrow brings, do we?" "I suppose not." She twisted her hands together, a nervous gesture he'd noticed before. "I just wanted to say, these past weeks, despite everything, I've been happy. Happier than I've been in a long time." Before he could respond, she disappeared into the bedroom, leaving him staring at the closed door. Happy. She was happy, and he was going to destroy that in a few short months. Eli lay awake long into the night, listening to the wind howl and wondering when exactly he'd become the villain in his own story. The next morning dawned clear and cold. They ventured out together to check the animals. Clara bundled in an old coat of his that swallowed her small frame. The world was transformed, pristine white as far as the eye could see. "It's beautiful," Clara breathed, her face bright with wonder. "Wait until you're sick of it come March," Eli warned, but he was smiling. She scooped up snow and threw it at him, laughing when he sputtered in shock. "Did you never play in snow as a boy?" "I was too busy working." "All work and no play, Mr. Monroe." She was already forming another snowball. "Now hold on." But she'd already thrown it, catching him square in the chest. Something young and reckless rose in him, and he bent to scoop his own ammunition. They played like children, chasing each other through the drifts, laughing until their sides hurt. Clara's hair came loose from its pins. streaming behind her as she ran. When Eli finally caught her, they tumbled into a snowbank together, breathless and giddy. He found himself on top of her, looking down at her flushed face, her bright eyes, her lips parted with laughter. Time seemed to stop. "Eli?" she whispered. He scrambled back, pulling her up. "We should go in. You'll catch cold." But that night, by the fire, she sat closer to him than usual. When she passed him his coffee, their fingers brushed and lingered. When she bid him good night, she hesitated, looking like she wanted to say something more. The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Then she turned away, and he let her go. The words he couldn't say burning in his throat. Later, staring at the dying fire, Eli faced the truth he'd been avoiding. He was falling in love with his wife. His temporary, mail order, one on a bet wife, and he had no idea what to do about it. The suspicion began as a whisper in Clara's mind, growing louder with each passing day. Small things at first, the way Eli sometimes looked at her with guilt shadowing his eyes, how he stiffened when she spoke of the future, the careful distance he maintained despite the growing warmth between them. It was Mrs. Patterson at the general store who finally gave voice to her fears. "You're looking well, Mrs. Monroe," the woman said, her tone anything but kind. "Marriage must agree with you, though I suppose any marriage is better than none for a woman in your circumstances." Clara kept her voice steady as she selected thread. "I'm fortunate in my husband." "Oh, yes, very fortunate." Mrs. Patterson leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Not many men would take such a bet seriously. $200, wasn't it? Though I heard Jake Harrington saying Eli's already won, keeping you happy this long." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She gripped the counter, the room spinning slightly. "I beg your pardon, Mrs." Patterson's eyes glittered with malicious pleasure. "Oh dear, you didn't know? About the wager? How Eli's friends bet him he couldn't get a mail-order bride to stay 6 months?" Clara carefully set down the thread. "I see. Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Patterson." She left without purchasing anything, walking blindly through town toward the wagon where Eli waited. Her mind reeled, piecing together 100 small moments that suddenly made terrible sense. A bet. She was nothing but a bet. "You're quiet," Eli observed on the ride home. "Am I?" She kept her eyes fixed on the horizon. Did something happen in town? Did someone say something? The concern in his voice made her want to laugh, or cry, or both. "No," she lied. "Just tired." That night, she served dinner in silence, barely touching her own food. Eli watched her with growing concern. "Clara, what's wrong?" "Nothing." She stood to clear the plates. "I think I'll retire early." He caught her wrist gently. "Talk to me." She looked down at his hand on hers. Rough, calloused, familiar now. How many times had she taken comfort from his touch? How much of it had been real? "When were you going to tell me?" she asked quietly. His hand dropped. "Tell you what?" "About the bet, the $200. She met his eyes, saw the truth written there in his stricken expression. "I see. You weren't going to tell me at all." "Clara, 6 months, was it? And we're already 3 months in. Halfway to your victory." Her voice was eerily calm. "Tell me, do you collect when I leave? Or must I stay the full term?" "It's not like that." "Then tell me what it's like. Eli, tell me why you sent for me. Tell me why you married me." Her composure cracked. "Tell me if anything between us has been real." He stood, reaching for her, but she stepped back. "I was drunk," he said desperately. "It was stupid. I know that. But Clara, these past months have been a lie." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Every kindness, every moment of tenderness, all calculated to keep me content, to win your wager. No, God, no. Clara, please." But she was already moving toward the bedroom. At the door, she turned back. "I've been a fool twice in my life. Eli, once for love, and once for hope. I won't be a fool again." She closed the door with quiet finality, and Eli heard the sound of the bolt sliding home. For the first time since her arrival, she'd locked him out. He stood there for a long moment, then grabbed his coat and headed for the barn. He couldn't stay in the house, couldn't bear the weight of what he'd done. Inside the bedroom, Clara sank onto the bed, her composure finally shattering. She pressed a fist to her mouth to muffle the sobs that tore from her throat. How could she have been so naive? How could she have let herself believe that someone might actually want her, damaged as she was? She thought of all the small moments she'd treasured. Eli's gruff concern during her illness, his laughter during their snowball fight, the way he'd defended her honor to anyone who questioned it, all of it tainted now, reduced to a performance worth $200. But even in her pain, she couldn't deny the truth her heart whispered. Performance or not, she'd fallen in love with him. With his rough kindness, his awkward attempts at conversation, the way he gentled horses and spoke of his mother with quiet reverence. She loved the man she'd thought he was. The question now was what to do about it. She could leave, take what little money she'd saved from selling eggs and catch the next train east. But to what? She had no family to return to, no position waiting. At least here she had work, purpose, a roof over her head, even if it all came with conditions. Or she could stay, finish out the 6 months, let Eli collect his winnings, and then, what? Would he send her away? Keep her on as a housekeeper? The uncertainty was almost worse than the betrayal. Outside in the barn, Eli sat in the hay, head in his hands. He'd destroyed everything. The look on Clara's face, betrayed, hurt, but somehow not surprised, as if she'd expected disappointment, would haunt him forever. When had the bet stopped mattering? When had she become essential to him? Maybe it was during her illness, when the thought of losing her had terrified him more than any storm or stampede. Maybe it was earlier, watching her transform his house into a home. Or maybe it was that first night, hearing her cry and realizing he'd invited pain into his life alongside his bride. Jake and the others had been pestering him about the bet. Just last week, Jake had cornered him in town. "So, how's married life treating you? Monroe, that little wife of yours seems to be sticking around. Leave it, Jake. Just wondering when you're planning to collect. The boys are getting restless." I said leave it. Jake had studied him with knowing eyes. "Don't tell me you've gone soft on her. She's pretty enough, I'll grant you. But this was just a bit of fun." Fun? Eli had tasted bile. Right. Now, sitting in the cold barn, he knew what he had to do. Come morning, he'd ride to town and tell Jake and the others the bet was off. He'd forfeit, pay them if he had to. It wouldn't fix things with Clara, but at least the lie would end. He spent the night in the barn, shivering in his coat, missing the warmth of his house, missing Clara more. At dawn, he found her in the kitchen, dark circles under her eyes, testament to her own sleepless night. She didn't acknowledge him, just went about making breakfast with mechanical precision. "I'm going to town," he said, "to talk to Jake, to tell him, to collect your winnings?" Her voice was cold. "To call off the bet." She paused, her back to him. "Why?" "Because I was wrong, because you deserve better, because—" He swallowed hard. "Because I care about you. Clara, more than I ever expected to. Care about me." She finally turned, and the emptiness in her eyes was worse than anger would have been. "Is that supposed to comfort me? I know I've hurt you. You've humiliated me. Again." Her voice broke. "Do you know what it's like, Eli, to learn that your worth can be measured in dollars? First my father sold my reputation to save his own. Now you've sold my dignity for drinking money. That's not—" But he stopped, because wasn't that exactly what he'd done? Clara straightened, pulling her dignity around her like armor. "I'll stay until the 6 months are complete. I have nowhere else to go, and you've at least provided shelter. But don't mistake my presence for forgiveness. Clara, please. After that, we can discuss terms. Perhaps you'll need a housekeeper. Perhaps not, but the pretense of marriage ends now." She set a plate before him with steady hands. "Eat your breakfast, Mr. Monroe." Then go to town and do what you must. I have work to do." He ate without tasting, watching her move about the kitchen with practiced efficiency. She was here, but already gone. Present in body, but with her spirit locked away where he couldn't reach. When he left for town, she didn't watch him go. The old Clara would have stood on the porch, maybe waved. This new Clara, the one he'd created with his deception, simply continued her chores as if he'd never existed. The 5 miles to town had never seemed longer. With each step his horse took, Eli felt the weight of what he'd lost. Not just Clara's trust, but the future he'd begun to imagine without realizing it. A future of shared meals and quiet evenings, of children who might have her gray eyes and his stubborn chin, of growing old together on the land he loved. He'd traded it all for $200 and the laughter of men whose opinions shouldn't matter. At the saloon, he found Jake holding court at the same corner table where it had all begun. The men looked up as he entered, grins spreading across their faces. Well, Eli Monroe, come to report on your investment?" Eli stood before them, hat in hand, feeling like a man approaching the gallows. "The bet's off." The smiles faded. "What do you mean, off?" Pete demanded. "I mean I'm not playing anymore. You win, I'll pay each of you $50. "Now hold on," Jake interrupted. "That wasn't the deal. The deal was 6 months. The deal was wrong." Eli's voice was hard. "I was wrong. It's done." Tom laughed, but it was an ugly sound. "Don't tell me you've fallen for her. Eli Monroe, brought low by a mail-order bride." "Watch your mouth," Eli warned. "Or what? You'll defend her honor?" Jake stood, smirking. "What honor does a woman like that have, coming west to marry strangers? Probably running from scandal." Eli's fist connected with Jake's jaw before he'd made the conscious decision to swing. Jake went down hard, taking a chair with him. "Jesus, Eli!" Will jumped back. "Anyone else got something to say about my wife?" Eli looked at each man in turn, fists clenched. Pete helped Jake up, who was working his jaw and glaring. "So it's like that?" "Yeah," Eli said quietly. "It's like that. The bet's done. And if I hear any of you've said one word about this to Clara or anyone else, I'll finish what I started here." He turned and walked out, leaving silence behind him. But the damage was already done. He'd defended Clara's honor too late, stood up for their marriage after he'd already destroyed it. The irony tasted bitter as the whiskey that had started it all. When he returned home, Clara was in the garden despite the cold, preparing beds for spring planting. She didn't look up as he approached. "It's done," he said. "I told them the bet was off." She continued working the soil. "How noble of you. Clara, did you hit someone?" She'd noticed his bruised knuckles. "Jake, he said—" Eli stopped. "It doesn't matter." "No, I suppose it doesn't." She finally looked at him, and the resignation in her eyes was devastating. "Thank you for ending it. That was decent of you. Decent." As if that was all she expected from him now. The bare minimum of human consideration. "I'll sleep in the barn again," he offered. "No." She stood, brushing dirt from her apron. "It's too cold, and I won't have your death on my conscience. The house is big enough for both of us." They could share the space, she was saying, but nothing more. No warmth, no laughter, no slowly building intimacy. Just two strangers under one roof, counting down the days until their contract expired. Eli nodded, accepting the terms of his punishment. He'd made his choices. Now he had to live with them. That night, they ate in silence, slept in separate rooms, and began the long, painful process of learning to live together while apart. The weeks that followed were a study in careful avoidance. Eli threw himself into ranch work with desperate intensity, leaving before dawn and returning after dark. He repaired every fence, mended every piece of tack, rebuilt the chicken coop Clara had wanted, anything to stay busy, to avoid the crushing weight of her polite indifference. Clara maintained the house with the same quiet efficiency as before, but the warmth had gone out of it. No more humming while she worked. No more special touches at dinner. No more evening conversations by the fire. She spoke only when necessary, her words measured and distant. He tried. God help him. He tried to make amends. Fresh flowers appeared on the kitchen table. She put them in water without comment. He fixed the loose board on the porch that had always creaked under her step. She walked over it without acknowledgement. He bought peppermint sticks in town, remembering she'd admired them once. They sat untouched in the cupboard until they gathered dust. "You're killing yourself," Tom Bradley said one day, finding Eli wrestling with fence posts in the bitter cold. "And for what? She's still there, ain't she?" Eli drove the post deep with more force than necessary. "What do you want, Tom?" "Jake sent me. Wants to know if you're coming to his wedding." "Jake's getting married?" Eli straightened, surprised. "To the widow Harrison. Quick courtship. But then Jake always was impulsive." Tom studied him. "Look, about the bet. There is no bet. I know. We all know. Jake's sorry for what he said. We all are." Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Truth is, we're happy for you, finding someone, even if it started wrong. Martha says, I didn't find anyone." Eli cut him off. "I destroyed something before it had a chance to begin." That night, he came in to find Clara pale and drawn, one hand pressed to her stomach. "Are you ill?" The words came out sharper than intended, fear making him brusque. "I'm fine," but she swayed slightly, gripping the table for support. He was beside her in 2 strides, catching her as her knees buckled. "You're not fine." She tried to pull away, but weakness betrayed her. "It's nothing, just tired." He half carried her to the sofa, ignoring her protests. She was too light, he realized, her face too thin. When was the last time he'd seen her eat a full meal? "Have you been sick?" He felt her forehead, cool, no fever. "Please, just leave me be." But her voice was thread-thin, exhausted. He brought her water, watched her sip it slowly. "Clara, talk to me. Are you in pain?" She closed her eyes. "Why do you care?" The question cut deep, but he answered honestly. "Because despite everything, you're still my wife, and He swallowed hard. "I still care about you." She laughed, a brittle sound. "Your wife, for another 2 months." "Is that what this is about? You're making yourself sick counting down the days." "No." She opened her eyes, and they were bright with unshed tears. "I'm with child. Eli." The words hit him like a sledgehammer. He stared at her, unable to process what she'd said. "That's not... We never..." But then he remembered. One night, during the blizzard's aftermath, when the joy of surviving had made them reckless, they'd kissed by the fire, and one thing had led to another, and for a few precious hours, they'd been truly husband and wife. Just once. But once was enough. "Oh, God," he breathed. "Yes." Her voice was steady now, resolved. "I realized a few weeks ago. I thought perhaps I was mistaken, but..." She shrugged. "I've been through this before. Rose, her lost baby, and now she was pregnant again, in a marriage built on deception, with a man she could no longer trust. Clara," he reached for her hand, but she pulled back. "I won't leave," she said quietly. "A child needs a father, even one who, even you. But don't mistake this for forgiveness. Eli, I'm simply being practical." Practical. The word tasted like ashes. "Clara, this changes everything." "Does it? You still lied to me? Still made our marriage a mockery?" "A child doesn't erase that." He wanted to argue, to plead, to somehow make her understand that everything had changed the moment he'd realized he loved her. But the exhaustion on her face stopped him. "You need to rest," he said instead. "And eat. You've not been taking care of yourself." "I've managed." "Barely, from the looks of it." He stood. "I'll make soup. I can..." "Rest." It came out as an order, and for once, she didn't argue. He made the soup with careful attention, remembering how she'd taught him to add the vegetables in the right order, to season with a light hand. When he brought it to her, she was crying silently, tears rolling down her cheeks. "What is it? Are you in pain?" She shook her head. I'm scared, she whispered. What if I lose this one too? What if it's my fault again? It wasn't your fault. He sat beside her, careful not to crowd her. Clara, losing Rose wasn't your fault. And you won't lose this baby. You can't know that. No, he agreed. But I can make sure you're taken care of. That you rest, eat properly, have whatever you need. I can do that much. She looked at him then. Really looked at him for the first time in weeks. Why? Because it's my child too, he said simply. And because He stopped, knowing she wasn't ready to hear declarations of love. Because it's the right thing to do. She nodded slowly, accepting the soup from his hands. As she ate, color returned gradually to her cheeks. I'll need to see the doctor in town, she said eventually. I'll take you tomorrow. People will talk, a mail-order bride, pregnant so soon. Let them talk. His voice was fierce. Anyone says a word against you or our child, they'll answer to me. Our child. She tested the words, a wonder in her voice that made his chest tight. I suppose it is, isn't it? That night, Eli moved his things back into the main room, close enough to hear if she needed anything. Clara didn't protest, whether from exhaustion or acceptance. He couldn't tell. He lay awake thinking about the future. A child. His child. Their child. The wonder of it warred with terror. What kind of father would he be? His own had been a harsh man, quick with criticism and slow with praise. Eli had sworn he'd never have children, never risk becoming what his father was. But now, faced with the reality, all he could think was how he wanted to be different. To be the kind of father who taught with patience, who showed love freely, who made his children feel safe and valued. If Clara would let him. If she could forgive him. If they could somehow build something real from the ruins of his deception. The next morning, she emerged from the bedroom moving carefully, one hand protective over her still flat stomach. How are you feeling? Better. She accepted the tea he offered. Thank you for last night, for the soup, and for not pressing. I meant what I said. Whatever you need. She studied him over the rim of her cup. I need honesty, Eli. From now on, no more lies, no more pretense. If we're to raise a child together, I need to trust you. Yes, he met her eyes squarely. I promise, no more lies. And I need time. I can't just forgive and forget because of the baby. What you did. It brought back every humiliation, every moment of being unwanted, unloved. You're not unwanted. The words burst out before he could stop them. Clara, you have to know. Please. She held up a hand. Not now. Maybe not ever. Let's just focus on the baby, on being the best parents we can be. He nodded, though everything in him wanted to tell her the truth, that he loved her, had probably loved her since the moment she'd stood on that train platform with her chin up and fear in her eyes. But she was right. She needed time, and he'd give it to her, even if it killed him. The visit to Dr. Brennan confirmed what Clara already knew. She was roughly 2 months along, the baby due in high summer. The doctor, an older man who'd delivered half the county, was reassuring. You're healthy, Mrs. Monroe. I see no reason for concern. Eat well, rest when you need to, and avoid heavy lifting. And her previous loss? Eli asked, ignoring Clara's sharp look. Does that mean each pregnancy is different? Doctor, Brennan said kindly, what happened before has no bearing on this child. Try not to worry over much. On the ride home, Clara was quiet. Then, thank you for asking. About Rose. I should have asked sooner. Should have made sure you were all right before. He cut himself off. Before you bedded me? Her voice was dry rather than accusing. Before I acted on my feelings without considering the consequences. She glanced at him. Is that what that night was? Acting on feelings. He kept his eyes on the road. Yes. I see. She fell silent again, but he caught her small smile before she turned away. That evening, she cooked dinner for the first time in weeks, a proper meal instead of the simple fare they'd been subsisting on. Eli ate with appreciation. recognizing the olive branch for what it was. "I've been thinking," Clara said as she cleared the plates. "About names. If it's a boy, perhaps James, after your grandfather." Eli's throat tightened. She'd remembered a passing comment he'd made about his grandfather, the one person in his childhood who'd shown him unconditional kindness. "I'd like that," he managed. "And if it's a girl—" She hesitated. "Not Rose. I couldn't bear it. But perhaps Margaret? It was my grandmother's name. Margaret Monroe." He tested it out. "It's a good name." They spent the evening discussing the practical matters, converting the small storage room into a nursery, laying in supplies, preparing for the reality of a baby on an isolated ranch. It wasn't the warm intimacy of before, but it was progress. They were talking, planning, building something together even if it wasn't quite what either had imagined. As Clara rose to retire, she paused by his chair. "Eli? I'm still angry, still hurt, but I'm glad our child will have you for a father. You're a good man, despite your failings." Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving him with a spark of hope he hardly dared nurture. A good man. Despite his failings, it wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a beginning. Spring came slowly to Wyoming, fighting winter for every inch of ground. Clara watched the changes from the kitchen window, snow melting into mud, brave green shoots pushing through cold earth, the return of birds whose songs she'd missed all winter. Her body changed too, the gentle swell of her belly now visible beneath her apron. Eli had become something between a guardian and a ghost, always nearby but never imposing. He'd rebuilt the chicken coop stronger than before, brought home 3 good laying hens and a rooster. He'd expanded the garden plot without being asked, turned the soil when it was ready. Every evening, he left small offerings on the kitchen table, the first wildflowers of spring, a particularly smooth river stone, a bird's nest fallen from the eaves, perfectly intact. Clara accepted these tokens silently, arranging the flowers in a cup, placing the stone on the windowsill, studying the intricate weave of the nest. She understood what he couldn't say, that each small gift was an apology, a promise, a plea for something he no longer dared ask for aloud. The nightmare started in her 5th month. She would wake gasping, phantom pain in her belly, certain she was losing this baby too. The first time, she muffled her cries in the pillow, not wanting to disturb Eli. But he was at her door within moments. "Clara, are you all right?" "Go away." But her voice broke on the words. He didn't go away. He sat on the floor outside her door, his back against the wall. "I'm here if you need me." She lay in the dark, tears on her cheeks, oddly comforted by his presence just beyond the door. When dawn came, she found him still there, asleep, sitting up, neck cricked at an uncomfortable angle. "Stubborn man," she murmured. But she brought him coffee and rubbed the knot from his neck without thinking. His eyes opened, meeting hers. "Better?" "Yes." She pulled her hand back, suddenly aware of the intimacy. "You didn't have to stay." "Yeah, I did." After that, the nightmares came less frequently, as if his sentinel presence had power to keep them at bay. The scandal arrived on a Tuesday. Clara was hanging laundry when she saw the rider approaching, a stranger in city clothes, picking his way carefully along the muddy track. Something in her chest tightened with premonition. "Mrs. Monroe?" The man touched his hat. "Mrs. Clara Monroe, formerly Miss Whitmore of Philadelphia?" "Yes." Her hands gripped the wet sheet. "Who are you?" "Theodore Hartley, attorney at law." He produced a letter from his coat. "I've been retained by Professor Jonathan Mills to locate you." The sheet slipped from nerveless fingers. Jonathan. The name she'd trained herself never to think, never to speak. "What does he want?" Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "Perhaps we could speak inside?" But Eli was already there, having seen the stranger from the barn. He stood slightly in front of Clara, protective. "Who are you, and what's your business with my wife?" Hartley repeated his introduction, eyeing Eli warily. "Professor Mills wishes to resolve certain matters from the past." "He has no matters with me." Clara said firmly. "Tell him I want nothing from him." "I'm afraid it's not that simple." Hartley glanced meaningfully at Clara's obvious pregnancy. "There are questions of inheritance, legitimacy. Professor Mills has recently come into considerable wealth, his uncle's estate, and he wishes to ensure any potential heirs are provided for." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "Rose is dead. There are no heirs." "Rose." Hartley consulted his notes. "Ah, yes, the child. My condolences. However, Professor Mills was unaware of the child's passing. He assumed, well, he wishes to do right. You see, his wife has recently passed as well, and he feels it's time to acknowledge his obligations. Get off my property." Eli's voice was deadly quiet. "Now see here. The lady said she wants nothing from him. That's the end of it." Eli took a step forward. "You've got 10 seconds to get on your horse." Hartley retreated hastily. "I'll leave my card. Should Mrs. Monroe reconsider, she won't." Eli followed him to his horse, ensuring his departure. When he returned, Clara was sitting on the porch steps, shaking. "That was him?" Eli asked quietly. "The professor?" "His lawyer." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Jonathan wants to buy his conscience clean. A little money to make up for ruining my life. Clara," he called Rose illegitimate, a potential heir, like she was property to be accounted for. Tears came then, hot and angry. She was perfect. Eli, 10 fingers, 10 toes, the tiniest fingernails you ever saw. She lived 3 days, and she was perfect. And he never even knew her name. Eli sat beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Tell me about her." No one had ever asked her that. Not once in all the months of grief had anyone wanted to hear about her daughter as a person, rather than ashamed to be hidden. She had dark hair, like mine, and blue eyes. All babies do. I know. But hers were so bright. She rarely cried, just looked around like she was memorizing everything. Clara smiled through her tears. The midwife said she was too small, too weak, but she was strong. She held my fingers so tight. What happened? She just stopped. One morning she was there, and then she wasn't. The doctor said it happens sometimes, that God takes them back. Her voice hardened. But the neighbors said it was God's judgment on my sin. Bastards. My parents had her buried in the pauper's field, no marker, no ceremony, as if she'd never existed at all. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Eli asked, "What would you have put on her stone? If you could?" Clara closed her eyes. "Rose Clara Whitmore, born to love, returned to grace. That's beautiful. She was beautiful." Clara pressed a hand to her swollen belly. "What if this one? This one will be fine," Eli said firmly. "This baby has 2 parents who want it, a home ready for it, and all the love in the world waiting. That's the difference." She looked at him then, really looked at him, saw the fear in his eyes that matched her own, the fierce protectiveness, the love he was so careful not to speak. "Eli." But before she could finish, another rider appeared on the horizon. This one she recognized. Tom Bradley, riding hard. "Fire!" Tom shouted as he neared. "The Morrison place is burning. They need every hand." Eli was moving before Tom finished speaking, saddling his horse with practiced efficiency. "Stay here," he told Clara. "Bar the door and don't open it for anyone but me." "Be careful," she called, but he was already gone. The hours that followed were agony. Clara could see smoke on the horizon, black and ominous. She paced the house, started a dozen tasks and finished none, jumped at every sound. The Morrison ranch neighbored theirs to the east. If the fire spread, near sunset, she heard horses, multiple horses. She grabbed the shotgun Eli had taught her to use, heart pounding. "Clara, it's me!" Eli's voice, rough with smoke. She threw open the door to find him soot-covered and exhausted. Tom Bradley beside him, supporting a younger man she didn't recognize. "This is Will Morrison," Eli explained as they helped the boy inside. "His family lost everything. I said he could stay with us until they rebuild. Will was perhaps 17, skinny and scared, with burns on his hands and smoke-seared lungs that made him cough. Clara didn't hesitate. Put him in the spare room. I'll get water heating. She tended Will's burns with gentle hands, made soup for all of them, prepared a pallet by the fire when the boy couldn't stop shivering despite the warm evening. Through it all, Eli watched her with something like wonder. Later, after Tom had gone and Will slept fitfully by the fire, Clara found Eli on the porch, staring at the faint glow still visible on the horizon. Was anyone hurt? No, thank God. But they lost the house, the barn, most of their stock. He scrubbed a hand over his face. Could have been us, just as easy. But it wasn't. She sat beside him. And you brought Will here without hesitation. You took him in without question. Of course I did. He's a child who needed help. She paused. You did good today. Eli, I left you alone. Pregnant and alone with that lawyer sniffing around. I'm not helpless. She touched his hand lightly. And I'm not alone. He turned his palm up, catching her fingers. No, you're not alone. They sat there as darkness fell properly, hands linked, watching lightning bugs dance in the garden. Something had shifted between them in the course of this long day. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. Perhaps recognition of what they were building together. Child or no child. I'm glad you hit Jake, Clara said suddenly. Eli blinked. What? When you went to town, to call off the bet, Tom told me you hit Jake for insulting me. She squeezed his hand. I'm glad. He had it coming. Still, she stood, their fingers still entwined. It matters that you defended me, even after, especially after. She went inside, leaving him to follow. That night, for the first time in months, they prepared for bed together, moving around each other with careful courtesy that was somehow more intimate than passion. When Clara paused at her bedroom door, Eli thought she might speak. Instead, she simply nodded good night, but her eyes were warm, and that was enough. In the morning, she woke to find him already up. Speaking quietly with Will by the fire, the boy looked better, though the haunted look remained. She heard Eli promising to ride over later, help with the salvage efforts. Morning, she said, and both men turned. Will scrambled to his feet, wincing at his bandaged hands. Ma'am, I'm grateful for your kindness. Soon as I can work again, you'll heal first, Clara said firmly. Then we'll discuss work. For now, you're our guest. After breakfast, Eli rode out with Will to survey the damage. Clara spent the morning baking, bread for the Morrison family, pies for the workers who had come to help rebuild. It felt good to have purpose beyond her own troubles. She was pulling the last pie from the oven when pain lanced through her belly, sharp enough to double her over. The pie slipped, catching the edge of the table, apples spilling across the floor. Not again. Please, not again. Another cramp. Stronger. Clara gripped the table, breathing through it, willing it to pass. False pains. Surely she'd had them with Rose, too, near the end. But when she looked down, there was blood. No! The word came out as a whisper. Then stronger. No! She needed Eli, needed the doctor, needed... The door burst open. Will Morrison stood there, eyes wide. Ma'am, I forgot my... He saw her face, the blood. Oh, God. Get Eli. Clara gasped. Hurry! The boy ran. Clara made it to the sofa before the next pain hit, clutching a cushion, trying not to panic. This baby would not die. She wouldn't let it. Hold on, she whispered to her belly. Just hold on. Your father's coming. Time blurred, pain and fear and desperate prayer. Then Eli was there, scooping her into his arms, shouting for Will to ride for the doctor. I've got you, he kept saying. I've got you, sweetheart. You're going to be fine. Sweetheart. When had he last called her that? The baby. We'll be fine. You both will be fine. But his face was white with terror. He carried her to bed, held her hand through the pains, whispered promises and prayers and pleas. When doctor, Brennan finally arrived. Eli had to be forcibly removed from the room. "Let me work," the doctor said firmly. "You'll do her no good hovering." Eli paced outside the door. Will Morrison keeping silent vigil with him? Inside. Clara's cries tore at him like physical wounds. "She's strong," Will offered quietly. "Strongest woman I've seen." "Yeah." Eli's voice was hoarse. "She is." An eternity later, Dr. Brennan emerged. Sleeves rolled up. Expression grave, but not defeated. "The bleeding stopped. The baby's heartbeat is strong. But she needs complete rest. No lifting, no chores, minimal movement for at least 2 weeks." "She'll have it," Eli promised. "This happens sometimes. Doesn't mean she'll lose the child, but any more bleeding, any more pain, you send for me immediately." Eli nodded, already moving past him to Clara's room. She lay pale against the pillows. One hand curved protectively over her belly. "Still here," she whispered. "We're still here." He dropped to his knees beside the bed, catching her hand. "Thank God. Clara, I thought—" "Shh." She touched his face, fingers gentle against stubbled cheek. "We're all right. When I saw the blood on Will's shirt, when he said you were hurt." He pressed his forehead to their joined hands. "I can't lose you, either of you. I can't." "You won't." She stroked his hair. This strong man brought to his knees by fear. "We're not going anywhere." They stayed like that until she dozed, exhausted by the ordeal. Only then did Eli notice Will still waiting in the doorway. "She'll be okay?" the boy asked anxiously. "Yeah, Doc says she needs rest, but she'll be okay." Will nodded, relief clear on his young face. "I'll help. Whatever needs doing, cooking, cleaning, tending stock. My ma taught me. It's the least I can do after you took me in." Eli clapped him on the shoulder, grateful beyond words. "Thank you." And so their household grew by one, bound together by crisis and kindness, by the fragile life Clara carried and the love that neither she nor Eli quite dared name. But it was there in every careful touch, every worried glance, every moment of their vigil. It was there, waiting to be born. The days of enforced rest transformed the Monroe household in unexpected ways. Clara, confined to bed on doctor's orders, chafed at the restriction but submitted when Eli threatened to tie her down if necessary. Will Morrison proved himself invaluable, taking over the cooking with surprising skill and maintaining the house with quiet efficiency. "Your mother taught you well," Clara told him one afternoon as he brought her soup. The boy flushed with pride. "She said a man who can't care for himself can't care for anyone else." It was Eli who struggled most with the new arrangement. He hovered constantly, appearing at Clara's door a dozen times a day with increasingly transparent excuses. "Just checking if you need anything. Thought I heard something. Window looked drafty." Finally, Clara had enough. "Eli Monroe, sit down." He perched uncomfortably on the chair beside her bed. "I should get back to—" "You should stay put for 5 minutes and talk to me like a normal person instead of a worried hen." Despite himself, he smiled. "I don't hover." "You do. Poor Will can barely turn around without tripping over you checking on me. I'm just scared, I know." Her voice gentled. "So am I. But wearing a path in the floor won't help." He studied his hands, work rough and capable. "When I saw the blood, all I could think was that I'd done it again, taken something good and destroyed it through my own stupidity. You didn't cause this, Eli. Maybe not directly, but the stress, the unhappiness—" "Stop!" Clara reached for his hand. "This happened with Rose, too. Nearly lost her at 5 months, spent weeks in bed. It's my body, not your conscience. That's the problem." He gripped her fingers carefully. "I should have known. Should have been more careful with you. I'm not made of glass." She shifted, wincing slightly, and his grip tightened, though perhaps a bit fragile just now. They sat quietly, hands linked, listening to Will moving about in the kitchen. Through the window, Clara could see the garden beginning to bloom, the apple tree she'd pruned showing new growth. "Tell me about the ranch," she said. What needs doing that you're not doing because you're here fussing over me? So he talked. About the new calves, the fence that needed extending, his plans for a larger barn. Clara listened, offering suggestions, asking questions that showed she'd been paying attention all these months, somewhere in the telling. The tension eased from his shoulders. I want to plant more apple trees, Clara said when he paused. A proper orchard. We could sell cider, dried apples for winter. He looked at her carefully. The ranch needs diverse income. Cattle alone won't sustain us forever. The words of partnership, of future, of permanence. Eli's throat tightened. Clara, and I think we should hire Will properly once his family is settled. He's a good worker, and we'll need the help with the baby. She was planning again, building a future that included him. After everything, she was choosing to stay. Whatever you want, he managed. What I want is to get out of this bed. But she was smiling. What I want is to see my garden. What I want... She stopped, color rising in her cheeks. What? Nothing. Foolishness. Tell me. She looked away. I want to dance again. Just once. I used to love dancing. Before, there were socials in Philadelphia, concerts in the park. I haven't danced since... A shrug. Well, since before. When you're well, Eli promised. When the baby's here safe and you're strong again, I'll take you dancing. You dance. Badly, but I'll learn. She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. I'll hold you to that. Eli Monroe. That evening, a letter arrived that shattered their fragile peace. Will brought it in, his face troubled. Ryder left this, said it was urgent. The letter was from Clara's sister, the first contact from her family since she'd left Philadelphia. Dearest Clara, it began. I pray this finds you well. I write with dire news. Papa has died, quite suddenly, of a heart ailment. Mama is beside herself and speaks of you constantly. The scandal has died with him. People have forgotten or found new gossip to occupy them. Please, sister, come home. We need you. Clara read it twice, then handed it wordlessly to Eli. He scanned the contents, his expression darkening. They cast you out, left you to fend for yourself. Now they want you back. My mother needs me. Your mother let your father disown you. Where was her need then? Clara's hands twisted in the bedsheets. She's still my mother, and you're still my wife. The words came out harsh, desperate. You can't travel, not now. The baby. I know. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I know I can't go, but Eli, she's all alone now. Whatever she did, she's suffering. He wanted to rage against the unfairness of it, these people who'd hurt her now pulling at her tender heart. But the tears on her face stopped him. Write to your sister, he said finally. Tell her the truth, that you're with child, under doctor's care, unable to travel. If they truly need you, they'll understand. And if they don't, then they never deserved you in the first place. Clara pulled him down for a kiss on the cheek, surprising them both. Thank you. He touched the spot her lips had blessed, warmth spreading through him. For what? For not demanding I choose, for understanding even when you're angry on my behalf. I'll always be angry at anyone who hurts you, he said quietly. But your decisions are your own. I learned that lesson too well. She kept his hand as she composed her reply, drawing strength from his presence. The letter was harder to write than she'd expected. How to explain her new life, her pregnancy, her husband who'd started as a stranger and become so much more. In the end, she kept it simple. The truth of her condition, her regret at missing the funeral, her hope that they could correspond going forward. She signed it Clara Monroe without hesitation. Will you post this tomorrow? She asked Eli. Of course. He tucked the letter away carefully. And Clara, if they write back, if they want you to visit after the baby comes, we'll go together. All of us. They should meet your family. Our family. He didn't say it, but Clara heard it anyway. That night, she woke to find Eli asleep in the chair beside her bed, one hand stretched out as if to assure himself of her presence even in dreams. She studied his face in the moonlight. The lines worry had etched, the gentleness sleep revealed, the strength that had become her anchor. When had everything changed? When had this man she'd married for survival become essential to her very breath? "I forgive you," she whispered to the darkness. "God help me, I forgave you weeks ago." But she wasn't ready to say it aloud. Not yet. Trust, once broken, needed time to fully mend. Still, looking at him, keeping vigil through the night, she felt the last of her anger dissolve. The next weeks passed in gentle routine. Clara grew stronger, the baby's movements reassuring her daily. Will's family, with help from neighbors, raised a new cabin and barn. The boy split his time between helping his parents and the Monroes, clearly torn between duty and preference. "Just hire him already," Clara told Eli one morning. "He practically lives here anyway. His PA needs him. His PA has 3 older sons. Will's happy here." She paused meaningfully. He could use a steady wage to help his family recover. Eli shook his head, smiling. "You've got it all figured out, don't you? Someone has to think ahead." So Will Morrison became their first official hired hand, with a small room in the barn and wages that made his eyes widen. The boy threw himself into the work with renewed vigor, determined to prove their faith justified. Dr. Brennan visited weekly, each time pronouncing Clara improved. By late spring, he finally cleared her for light activity. "The danger's past," he announced. "Mind you still rest, no heavy lifting, but you can resume normal household duties." Clara was out of bed before he finished speaking, Eli catching her elbow when she swayed. "Easy, you've been flat for near a month, and I'm sick of it." But she leaned into his support, letting him guide her to the kitchen she'd missed so desperately. Everything looked different somehow, brighter, more precious. Will had kept it clean, but she could see where things weren't quite right, little disorder that made her fingers itch to fix them. "Tomorrow," Eli said firmly. "Today you sit on the porch and enjoy the sunshine." She didn't argue, too happy to be vertical again. The porch had become her favorite spot, watching the ranch come alive with spring. Eli had built her a rocking chair, set it where she could see both garden and pasture. "Happy?" he asked, bringing her tea. "Getting there." She caught his hand before he could retreat. "Sit with me, just for a minute." He settled on the step, back against the post, long legs stretched out. They didn't speak, just existed together in the warm afternoon, comfortable in shared silence. "I've been thinking," Clara said eventually, "about names again. Oh, James for a boy, still, but for a girl, I'd like Sarah. It means princess." She smiled softly. "Every little girl should feel like a princess, don't you think? Sarah Monroe." He tested it, nodded. "It's perfect." "Eli?" She waited until he looked at her. "The 6 months are up next week." He went very still. "I know. So what happens now? What do you want to happen?" She considered her words carefully. "I want to stay, build that orchard, raise our child, make this ranch everything it could be." "And us?" His voice was barely audible. "What do you want for us?" "I want..." She took a breath. "I want to try, really try. Not because of a bet or a baby or having nowhere else to go, but because," another breath, "because I care for you. Eli Monroe, despite my best efforts not to..." He turned, hope naked on his face. "Clara, I'm not saying everything's fixed. Trust takes time to rebuild, but I want to try. Yes." He was on his feet, reaching for her hands. "Yes, to all of it. Clara, I..." "Shh." She pressed a finger to his lips. "One step at a time. We have the rest of our lives to get it right." He kissed her finger, then her palm, then pulled her carefully to her feet. "Dance with me." "What? Now? You said you missed dancing." He positioned her hands, one on his shoulder, one in his. "So dance with me. There's no music." "Sure there is." He began to hum, something slow and sweet she didn't recognize. "Ma used to sing this." They swayed together on the porch, careful of her belly between them. Eli was right. He was a terrible dancer. He stepped on her feet twice, turned the wrong direction, lost the rhythm of his own humming. It was perfect. "I love you," he said suddenly, the words bursting out like water through a dam. "I've loved you for months, maybe from the beginning. I'm sorry it took me so long to know it." Clara's eyes filled. "Oh, Eli, you don't have to say it back. I know I hurt you. No trust takes time. But I needed you to hear it. Needed to stop hiding it." She lifted her face to his. "I love you too. You impossible, stubborn, wonderful man." Their kiss was different from any before. Soft with promise, sweet with forgiveness, warm with the future stretching before them. When they broke apart, both were crying. "Look at us!" Clara laughed through her tears. "What a pair we make! The best pair." Eli wiped her cheeks gently. "Mrs. Monroe, would you do me the honor of marrying me, properly this time, in the church, with words that mean something?" "Yes." No hesitation, no doubt. "Yes, Eli." From the barn. Will Morrison watched them embrace and grinned. About time those two figured it out. He'd been wondering how long it would take. Whistling. He went back to work, giving them their privacy. After all, even a hired hand knew better than to interrupt a proposal, especially one that was long overdue. The summer heat lay heavy on the Wyoming plains the day Clara Monroe brought new life into the world. The labor started at dawn, gentle at first, then building like a storm across the prairie. Eli, who'd faced down blizzards and stampedes without flinching, turned white as milk at her first real cry of pain. "Get Dr. Brennan," Clara gasped between contractions. "And stop looking like you're about to faint. I'm not—" But his hands shook as he pulled on his boots. "Eli." She caught his sleeve. "I'll be fine. We'll be fine. Now go." Will had already saddled the fastest horse. The boy had grown inches since spring, filling out with good food and hard work. "I'll stay with her," he promised. "Ma taught me some about birthing. Helped with my sisters." Eli gripped his shoulder. "Don't let her die. Wasn't planning on it, boss." Despite his light tone, Will's face was serious. "Now ride. I've got her." The 5 miles to town had never seemed longer. Eli pushed his horse hard, praying with every hoofbeat. "Let 'em live. Both of them. Please, God, let them live. Doctor." Brennan was finishing breakfast when Eli burst through his door. The older man took one look at his face and reached for his medical bag. "How far apart are the pains?" 5 minutes, maybe less. "Good." First babies usually take their time. He was already moving toward his buggy, though Clara seems the type to do things her own way. They made it back to find Clara walking the parlor, Will trailing anxiously behind with towels and water. "Finally," she said, then gasped as another contraction hit. "This child has your impatience. Eli Monroe." "Doctor." Brennan took charge efficiently, banishing both men to the porch. "I'll call when you're needed." What followed were the longest hours of Eli's life. Clara's cries carried through the windows, each one a knife to his heart. He paced while Will sat whittling, the rhythmic scrape of knife on wood oddly soothing. "She's strong," Will said for the 10th time. "The strongest." Eli stopped pacing to stare at the horizon. "Did I ever tell you how we really met, how this all started?" "No, sir." So Eli told him, the whole shameful truth, the bet, the deception, the months of careful distance and slowly building love. Will listened without judgment, still whittling what was beginning to look like a tiny horse. "Seems to me," the boy said when Eli finished, "you both got what you needed, even if you didn't go about it right. She needed a home. You needed a heart. Everything else is just details. When did you get so wise?" Will grinned. Must be Mrs. Monroe's cooking, brain food. A particularly sharp cry from inside made both men flinch. Then, suddenly, silence. Eli's heart stopped. The silence stretched 1 heartbeat. 2, then, a baby's wail. Strong and indignant. Split the air. Eli sank onto the step. legs suddenly water. Thank God, thank God. Minutes later, Dr. Brennan appeared, smiling broadly. Congratulations, Mr. Monroe. You have a daughter. Clara? Tired but well. Asking for you. Eli nearly knocked the doctor down in his haste. He found Clara propped against pillows, hair damp with sweat, face glowing with exhaustion and joy. In her arms, wrapped in one of his mother's quilts, was the tiniest human he'd ever seen. Come meet your daughter, Clara whispered. He approached like she was holding spun glass. The baby's face was red and wrinkled, topped with dark fuzz. Her eyes were closed, one tiny fist pressed against her cheek. Sarah? He asked. Sarah Margaret Monroe. Clara shifted, offering the bundle. Would you like to hold her? Terror seized him. What if I drop her? You won't. She pressed the baby into his arms, showing him how to support her head. There, see, natural father. The weight of his daughter was nothing and everything. She stirred, making small sounds, and one hand escaped the blanket. Tiny fingers, impossibly perfect, each with its own miniature nail. Without thinking, Eli offered his finger. She gripped it with surprising strength. Oh, he breathed, understanding hitting like lightning. This was what love at first sight truly meant. Not the slow build he'd experienced with Clara, but instant, complete, devastating devotion. He would die for this child, kill for her, move heaven and earth to keep her safe and happy. Now you know, Clara said softly, watching his face. How it feels. Why losing Rose nearly killed me. I'm sorry. The words were inadequate, but all he had. God, Clara, I'm so sorry. I know, but Sarah's here now. Our miracle, our daughter, our family, our future. Eli carefully sat on the bed's edge, still cradling Sarah. She's perfect. Wait until she's screaming at 3 a.m. But Clara was smiling, leaning against his shoulder to admire their daughter. Are you ready for this? Really ready? No, he admitted. Terrified, actually. But with you beside me, we'll figure it out. They were married again 3 weeks later, as soon as Clara felt strong enough to stand through the ceremony. The church was packed. News of the Monroe baby had softened the town's opinion of their mail-order marriage. Even Mrs. Henderson brought a christening gown, though she couldn't quite meet Clara's eyes when presenting it. Clara wore her mother's dress, finally sent from Philadelphia, along with tearful letters of reconciliation. Her sister had written separately, promising to visit come spring. The scandal of the past seemed insignificant next to the reality of a grandchild her mother would never meet if bridges weren't mended. Eli stood at the altar in his new suit, watching Clara walk toward him with Sarah in her arms. Will Morrison served as witness, beaming like a proud uncle. When Reverend Taylor asked if anyone objected, Jake Harrington stood in the back. Eli tensed, but Jake only said, "Yeah, I object to not being invited to the reception. Where's it at, Monroe?" Laughter rippled through the church. Clara turned to look at Jake, then at Eli. "The man who started it all," she murmured. "Should I throw him out?" Eli whispered back. "No." She smiled. "Without his stupid bet, we'd never have found each other. He can come to the reception." The vows were different this time. Not the quick, business-like exchange of their first wedding, but words heavy with meaning. When Eli promised to love, honor, and cherish, his voice broke. When Clara promised to be his true and faithful wife, tears ran unchecked down her cheeks. "I now pronounce you, again, husband and wife." Reverend Taylor concluded with a smile. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Monroe, properly this time." Their kiss was interrupted by Sarah's hungry wail, causing another ripple of laughter, real life, asserting itself even in romantic moments. But that was their way, Clara thought as she soothed their daughter, building something true from imperfect beginnings. The reception was held at the ranch, tables groaning under the weight of food neighbors had brought. Clara had worried they'd be snubbed, but the opposite proved true. Women who'd whispered behind their hands now cooed over Sarah, sharing advice and admiration in equal measure. Men who'd mocked Eli for his mail-order bride now slapped his back, congratulating him on his beautiful family. People are strange, Clara observed, watching Mrs. Patterson bounce Sarah with surprising gentleness. They just needed time, Eli said, his arm around her waist, to see what I saw from the beginning, which was that you're extraordinary, that you could make any place home just by being in it. He kissed her temple. That I'm the luckiest fool in Wyoming. As evening fell, musicians appeared. Tom's cousin and his fiddle. Will with a harmonica he'd been hiding. Old Sam from the general store with a banjo. They played on the porch while couples danced in the yard, lanterns strung between trees casting golden light. Our first real dance, Clara said as Eli led her out. Sarah slept in her basket, watched over by Will and half the church ladies. I've been practicing, Eli warned. Will's been teaching me. That explains where you both disappeared to in the evenings. He was better, she discovered, still not graceful, but confident enough to lead her through a simple waltz. Other couples joined them, the yard becoming a dance floor under the stars. Look at us, Clara marveled. Who would have thought? Will, apparently. He says he knew from the first week we'd end up together. Smart boy. Smart woman, taking a chance on a fool like me. Smart fool, sending for a bride you'd never met. She smiled up at him. Though I still say you should have been more specific in your letter. Fair treatment could mean anything. What should I have written? The truth. Lonely rancher seeks woman willing to transform his life, teach him to love, and build a future together. Would you have come? Clara considered. Probably not. It would have sounded too good to be true. They danced in comfortable silence, surrounded by neighbors who'd become friends, on land that had become home. The stars wheeled overhead, vast and bright in the clear Wyoming sky. I love you, Mrs. Monroe, Eli said quietly, more than I knew was possible. And I love you, Mr. Monroe, bet and all. From her basket, Sarah stirred and cooed, adding her voice to the night's music. Their daughter, their miracle, the living proof that beauty could grow from imperfect soil. Later, after the guests had gone and Will had retired to his room in the barn, Eli and Clara sat on their porch with Sarah between them. The night was warm. Crickets singing in the garden Clara had coaxed to life. What are you thinking? Clara asked, seeing his distant expression. About my mother. Wishing she could have met you, both of you. Clara took his hand. She knows. Somehow. I believe she knows. Sarah made a small sound, not quite crying, but demanding attention. Eli picked her up, still marveling at how natural it felt now. His daughter settled against his chest with a contented sigh. Tell me again, Clara said softly. About the orchard. About our future. So he did, painting pictures with words of apple trees heavy with fruit, of Sarah running between the rows, of other children following, of seasons turning and love growing deeper with each passing year, of a life built on truth this time, on choice rather than chance. And we'll weather whatever comes, he concluded. Storms, droughts, good years and bad. Together, Clara agreed, leaning into his warmth. In the distance, a coyote howled, answered by another. But the sound held no threat now, just wildness calling to wildness under the vast sky. Here on the porch, in the circle of lantern light, was civilization, family, home, the mail-order bride and the cowboy who'd won her on a dare, the woman who'd traveled west seeking survival and found love, the man who'd risked $200 and gained everything worth having. Not the story either had expected to write, but the one they'd chosen to live. And in the end, Clara thought as she dozed against her husband's shoulder, their daughter safe in his arms. That made all the difference. Choice, forgiveness, love. The three pillars on which any good marriage stood, mail order or otherwise. Thank you all for listening to this tale from the Wild West. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying this story from. Whether you're driving through the mountains, relaxing at home, or maybe even out on the range yourself. Please subscribe to Wild West Campfire and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, partners.